So today we're going to talk about Betty Skelton. So I went on Wikipedia because it seems to be the easiest place to go and get a biography. And so let me give you just a little background on Betty Skelton. Betty Skelton was a land speed record holder and aerobatics pilot who set 17 aviation and automobile records. She was known as the First Lady of Firsts and helped create opportunities for women in aviation, auto racing, aeronautics, and advertising, believe it or not. She was born in Pensacola, Florida, June 28, 1926. Parents, teenagers, she was their only child. As a toddler, she was fascinated by airplanes that flew over her home near the Naval Air Station there. Preferred model airplanes over dolls. When she turned 8, she started reading books on aviation, made her parents realize that she was serious about flying. Whenever they could, the family spent time at the municipal airport. How many of us were taken down to the municipal airport to watch the planes come and go?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah,
all the time.
Love that. Well, she would talk to pilots and talk the pilots themselves into letting her ride with them on local flights. At the age of 18, she received her commercial pilot license. 18.
She was capable of soloing at the age of 12, but you couldn't solo until you were 16 is when she got her ability to fly solo in a single-engine plane.
She became a U.S. female aerobatic champion in 1948, 49, and 50. Her last 2 championships made her and her plane, Little Stinker, famous. That plane now resides in the Smithsonian. In 56, she became an advertising executive with Campbell Ewald and worked for with General Motors on and in their TV and print ads. She was GM's first woman technical narrator at major auto shows where she would talk about and demonstrate automotive features, later becoming official spokeswoman for Chevrolet. While she worked with Chevrolet, she set numerous records with Corvettes and owned a total of 10 models. Between 56 and 57, Harley Earl and Bill Mitchell designed a special translucent gold Corvette just for her, which she drove to Daytona in 1957 to serve as the NASCAR pace car. So she died, by the way, August 31st of 2011. Hall of Fame inductions include Florida Sports Hall of Fame, 1977, International Motorsports Hall of Fame, NASCAR International Automotive Hall of Fame in 1983. By the way, she was the first woman. Women in Aviation Pioneer Hall of Fame, Corvette Hall of Fame, 2001, Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 2008. On the line with me now is a friend of mine that goes back, oh gosh, I guess to grade school, George. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. We spent a lot of time together, Donnie.
Yes, we did. Me in the principal's office, and you in study hall, I think.
Our home ec class.
Is that why it was the home ec class?
You and I had that together, I think.
Well, you know, I majored in home ec, in foods, actually, and so I stuck it all the way out just to get out of all those other ugly classes that I was in.
Either that or wood shop.
Wood shop. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Well, George, it's great to have you on. And, you know, it was George that was really instrumental in introducing us to his aunt, Betty Skelton. And we started talking, and one thing led to another. And Betty was obviously in the Corvette Hall of Fame. And George says, you want a Corvette? You don't know about Aunt Betty? And I said, no, I don't. So one thing led to another. Conrad kind of headed up all of the investigation into Betty with George. And George, unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to meet her, but boy, she would have fit right in with us.
Oh, let me tell you, she would have loved your show because you talked about cars and you talked about how they run and speed and all the things that she loved.
Did you ever have a chance to ride with her in any of her Corvettes?
The 65 Stingray's what kind of triggered me to contact you because I hadn't seen that car. I was in 9th grade at Johnston, and my dad told me that Betty was going to be at McRoberts Chevrolet on Saturday to do a demo for Chevrolet. And so I walked over there and saw her and walked up to her. I thought she wouldn't remember me, and she says, "Oh yeah, you're Howard's son." And so anyway, she got through with her deal, and she said, "How are you going to get home?" And I said, well, I'm going to walk. She said, well, come on, I'll give you a ride.
Oh gosh, that had to be wonderful.
So we went and got in that 65 Stingray, the red one, and we headed down Post Oak to Willow Bend, where I lived in Willow Bend, and stopped. She says, well, what do you think? And I said, I looked at her and I said, you want to get a wheel burger at Chuck Wagon?
Yes. Wheel burger or spoke burger or hub burger, one of those.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And so we stopped at Chuck Wagon and got a hamburger, and I got to talk to her. And not a little bit earlier, that would have been, I don't know, 66, 65. She had just set the land speed record out at Bonneville. And I asked her, I said, what was that like? What was the scariest moment? And she said, well, over 300, the wheels started coming off the ground.
Oh, my gosh.
And she was driving an Art Arfon's Green Monster, correct?
That's right, Cyclops.
And that was with the jet engine.
That's right. And it was unbelievable. She went 314 miles an hour, I think, on one run, averaged 277, I think.
Out of an F-86 Saberjet. How awesome was that?
Unbelievable. But that Corvette she had, I'll never forget that sound. And from driving Corvettes, there's just a special sound that Corvettes make. That 427, it was a 4-speed. She was driving that car back to Florida and was doing some promo spots as she was coming down and was headed back east. And so anyway, here I am. I'm in the car with the world's fastest woman, and none of my friends are seeing me. This was embarrassing. If I told them that, you would have gone, yeah, sure.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, of course we would have. I mean, we were kids in school at the time. Nobody would have ever believed that, but I do remember McRobert Chevrolet very well up there on Post Oak. That was the first chance that I had a chance to see a real Corvette in person on the showroom floor, and it happened to be a baby blue one in there, and I think it was about 1965. Of course, the doors were locked, couldn't sit inside of it, but wow, what a treat that was.
That became A.J. Foy.
Yes.
And so anyway, Betty took me home, which is a couple more blocks down, and my parents were there, and they came out and visited for a little bit. She had to go to another promo. But that was about the time my dad had the Metropolitan Theater, and he had started broadcasting the closed circuit Indianapolis races. And of course,
I vaguely remember that, yes, because you couldn't see them on television at the time.
No, and it was like $5 to get in, and he had like 100 cases of beer and all the mechanics in town. and it was a black and white projection screen. It was terrible. But the very first race in 64 was the one where 20 seconds into the race, they had that big wreck and 2 guys got killed. And of course, all the mechanics from Houston were going, did AJ make it through the smoke? And sure enough, he did. And he went on to win the race. Well, Betty helped a bunch with promoting those kinds of NASCAR type connections and such. But we used to love to go to Autorama there down at Sam Houston Coliseum and hear her talk about Chevrolets. She was the voice of Chevrolet.
That is so funny because, even when I think of Chevrolet back in the mid-'50s, I think of Dinah Shore and Buy Your Chevrolet in the USA theme, but I also recall that there was a woman spokesperson that would show up in some of the ads back in that day, and that was her.
Yeah, it was. In fact, my favorite picture of her is this one with the gold Corvette that Mitchell built for her. And it's amazing. I was lucky to live during her Chevrolet era rather than the aviation era. And this is a picture of my mother and Betty at the Houston Municipal Airport, where she used to fly in. And of course, I wasn't born then when she did all those records, but I followed her on Corvettes and the different Corvettes she had when she passed away. She got the Corvette Hall of Fame, and those folks will be on, and they're great folks. But she would have been buried in that Corvette if she could have.
Well, is it on your mother's side or your dad's side of the family?
My dad. It was your first cousin. They were first cousins. My family was all railroad people living here in Central Texas, and they moved down to Florida with a railroad, and that's where she got into aviation and stuff. My Uncle Joe was a Hellcat pilot trainer at Pensacola Air Base. And an interesting fact about Betty, not people know that she flew in the very first Blue Angels exhibition that they ever did. They called her the sweetheart of the Blue Angels.
Wow.
Because she took that plane that's right above me and flew right at them, and then they would go divide off, and she'd fly right through them at age probably about 18.
And George, that plane behind you, is that the one that hangs in the Smithsonian?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
That's the one at Dulles at the Air and Space Museum. It's the very first plane you see when you come in, and it tells the story about her. And of course, these histories are all available online. I posted a couple of links. In fact, I posted a link to her actually flying on your website, and it's amazing. I still this day, and that's why she got selected to be astronaut 7.5.
Yes, now, and we didn't even touch on that because back in the day, in the 60s, she was at the height of her aviation career, and actually beyond, truly.
Yeah.
And she was part of that whole Mercury 7 crew.
Yeah, she went through the astronaut training, if I read correctly, and evaluated for an opportunity to be an astronaut.
She was, and of course, at that day and age, she said she was 25 years ahead of her time because they weren't going to send a woman into space. The problem was that she exceeded the astronauts on most of the tests, and NASA didn't want to release that a 5'3", 100-pound woman could do that, and it was pretty tough. And so I remember reading about Scott Carpenter's wife complaining about the astronaut training and the time that they were away from their families and stuff. And Betty's response was, if he doesn't want to go, I'll fly.
George, it's great to see you. Great to talk to you. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to have Derek Moore, the Director of Marketing and Communications of National Corvette Museum. We're going to continue our discussion of Betty Skelton. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. It's great to see you, and I hope to see you at the high school reunion.
Absolutely.
All right, my friend. You take care of yourself.
All right.
George Skelton. This is a fascinating story that we've been working on now for over a month, I think, and it's truly remarkable.
Yeah, George had reached out to us, letting us know his relationship with Betty, and we thought, what a killer story this is. Yeah. And I've been spending a month now putting it all together. We really appreciate his time helping us do this.
Just ahead, it's the In Wheel Time New Car Showroom, and we're going to review the Hyundai Sonata. Hey, you can always take our show on the road with you, right in your hip pocket on your smartphone. Yeah, we're on InWheelTime.com, Periscope, Facebook, and we're also on YouTube. God help us all. We'll be back.